This is the Catalog, where we talk about what digital products can be. My name's Justin, and I'm here with Todd Finch. And was it Todd Skateboard Finch?
Todd Mitchell.
Todd Mitchell
Finch.
Nice. So yeah, I'm really excited to have you on here. I introduced you to somebody earlier, and I told them about your time at Netscape. And when they heard the word Netscape, they're like, "Oh, so he's one of the OGs."
Yeah, old guys.
I think they meant like original gangsters, right? But yeah, tell us a little bit about your history and like where you got started in tech and where you're going with it.
Sure. 37 years in tech, starting with a mainframe company, a company called Honeywell. I fresh out of university, they had this training program. Computers were going to be a thing, and so I thought it would be a good thing to start in. And from day one, I just got hooked with how technology played this narrative throughout society and how it was shaping and forming how we would act, behave, benefit, fail. And so one of the guys that was at that program ended up running Silicon Graphics, which was the first 3D piece of hardware in the marketplace, called Silicon Graphics, SGI. And Rob Burgess, that was my mentor. And he introduced me to the whole world of Silicon Valley. And Silicon Graphics was founded by a guy named Jim Clark. And Jim Clark, who I was able to have some fun times with, moved over and started this company called Netscape. And so I was one of the first 40 employees worldwide to join the company. And so I was exceptionally fortunate, and I had this front row seat watching this thing called the internet emerge. And so from there, everything else is kind of this, awesome, amazing, awesome journey of Todd, where I was able to watch brilliant people and observe and participate and add value in this ever-changing and ever-evolving world. And we've seen from that moment when the kind of HTML environment emerged as this ubiquitous, open way of communicating, evolved in a number of different chapters. It went from the internet, which was the ability to just read things, to cloud computing and mobility, which was reading and writing, and then this emergent area we're in now called Web3 is where you read, write, and own. And so having rightful ownership and rightful identity in the world as we move forward now is going to be a really important thing, because now we're starting to see how AI and other really powerful technologies are going to really scale what's been happening for the last 37 years. And so that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see, especially younger people coming into it as well. And that, when a wave comes and a new technology arises, just how big that wave seems, but also, you see these waves come and go, and like, how do you navigate knowing what's a trend and something that's like overhype towards something that's actually foundationally different and a new chapter?
That's a great question. I think what you do is once you get into it, once we got into tech, you start to see the curves. And every technology has a curve. It has the beginning point, it's apex, and then it kind of wanes. Whether it was the mainframe, or it was the PC, or it was the mobile phone, everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And once you've done it a few times, you start to really understand what is foundational and what is kind of window dressing. And the most unsuspecting things at the beginning can be the most important. The browser was 3,000 lines of code. So it took a really visionary person at the very beginning to understand what it meant to have ubiquitous communications. It wasn't about the underlying code or 3,000 lines of code. It didn't matter of the forward, backward button and how you navigated content. It didn't matter about the browser actually at all. It was what it enabled. And I think people with very kind of polymathematical views where they have seen a lot, they can probably ingest and understand the implications of the applications and the technologies of its time and where it could go. And then with like any great innovation, there's a lot of roadkill along the way. And so what you'll see is something with a great idea, with great vision, but it just didn't have the ability to sustain over time. Whereas other technologies, Netscape is a great example. It's not a legacy company. It's gone. Mm-hmm. It came and it went. And at one point it had 98% of the market share. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about the browser or even the technology that kind of helped enable the internet. It was so much bigger than that. And Mark and Ben from Andreessen Horowitz, in actual fact, Ben Horowitz was at Silicon Graphics and at Netscape, and so I worked with him in both companies, whereas Mark was actually found by Jim Clark at the University of Illinois because he was working on this thing called a browser. Mm-hmm. And I think Clark saw almost immediately where this could go. He also saw how genius Mark was. But Mark and Ben didn't just, sit on their hands and say, hey, we've developed a browser, let's go. I think they understood from the very beginning where it could go and the implications, because it was just so multifaceted. And so they started a fund that really supported entrepreneurs by helping cover some of their blind spots and helping them take their ideas to their highest potential. So is there a hard answer on what makes something a long-term thing? I think you have to look at what the ultimate purpose that belies what it's doing is. And so the let's call it the browser started Internet 1, mm-hmm. and then the mobile phone and I would suspect the iPhone started the whole idea of the possibilities of what mobility could be. And people take the genesis of that and they spin it to a whole higher level of possibility over time. And so there's the and this is what's so great about humanity is humanity grasps onto an idea and takes it to as far as it can possibly go. A great example of current technology like Web3, a lot of people called it dead a year or two ago because the form and the means of how that technology was surfaced was suspect. There was, some criminal activities behind it. Mm-hmm. There was a whole bunch of bad actors, but the general underlying idea was rightful ownership and rightful identity and rightful contribution at scale. You have 8 billion people on this planet, and how could you ever build a promise as big as that? So I think the underlying premise was huge. I think how it surfaced became really suspect. And I think a lot of people who were either fearful of it or didn't understand it shut it down. Mm-hmm. And if you look 25 years earlier, it's exactly what happened with the internet. In 1999, when the internet bubble popped, mm-hmm. 1999, 2000, you saw articles all over the newspaper. The internet is dead.
Yeah.
And so I think people who really embrace the core concepts of innovation and understand that it's not just about the specific tech that is in front of us right now, but the underlying premise and the purpose of that tech, I think that's what drives something that's either sustainable or a supernova.
Yeah, and you kind of talk about, there's waves and there's different pieces of technology, but then there's like tsunamis. And the three examples that you gave, the .com, mobile, and then Web3, these are kind of foundational shifts. Like you could distill them to a very simple concept, right? And you touched about okay, there's a lot of roadkill along the way, right? The .com, you had everybody had a website. It was this.com, this.com, this.com. Then the app boom, you have everybody wants to be in the app store, huge app store boom, and now nobody wants to install anything else on their phone anymore, right? So being a seasoned surfer and riding a couple of waves, and you've worked and advised a lot of different people that have rode those waves. How do you harness, like, how do you make sure that people don't end up as roadkill? How do you guide that innovation into something that's really successful, and how do you ride that wave in a way that's going to catch the crest of it?
If I could give you the answer to that, I think I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be on a yacht somewhere, just kind of with my feet up. The core root of what you're talking about is failure. Mm-hmm. And failure is the seeds of innovation. It is on the back of those roadkill. I can't tell you how many companies I've been with that were just the right idea at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of getting and innovating and committing to innovation, you have to commit to the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when you hit the ugly, you have to really embrace the ugly, because the ugly can actually be the most beautiful thing in the world, looked at in just a subtly different way. And that is what the adrenaline junkies like me who at my age are still in this. It's because it keeps always changing. And the game is to explore and to fail and to trip and fall, because it's through those moments where you actually surface genius and amazing opportunities. And so you have to have, every entrepreneur that I coach or I talk to, I say, you have to have a core purpose. And if your purpose is pointed big enough and properly, it will be never ending, because innovation is never ending. And just like you talked about the App Store curve and the mobility curve, that's the whole idea is that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread until another piece of sliced bread comes out in a different form and in a different way. And so if we all remember that innovation isn't about tech, it's mm-hmm. about people. And people are the ones who surface the innovation, mm-hmm. who build the technology. And so we have a responsibility as a group, as a society, to make sure as we continually build new innovations that we're aware that it's all by people, for people. And sometimes we lose sight of that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where lots of the bad tech innovation comes out of, right? Oh, we have this new tool or this new piece of technology. Let's build the solution around the technology rather than, bringing it back to the core and being, I want to build this digital product or this solution no matter what the technology, right? If the technology wasn't there, I would, a great example I have is company I've worked with called Flip. They're it's like a couponing app, mm-hmm. right? And it's like that need of window shopping, or that you don't need a piece of technology to do it. That core part of it is essential. It's the thrill of getting a deal or saving money on something. And no matter what kind of technology you have, the technology just complements that core dream, right? Or that core value that you're bringing to somebody, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is like, in this going into the Web3 side of things, where do you see that technology complementing, a host of different ideas?
Well, there are micro and macro trends. And the macro trend that I've seen over my career is the concept of centralization to decentralization to centralization to decentralization. We almost call it re-centralization because of a lot of the evolution of things, technology. It's because of the way people act and the dreams and aspirations of some people. And so centralization allowed for lots of efficiencies and control in the mainframe era. And that was the beginning, the essence of innovation in its own right. And it was going to create productivity and help businesses and people become better and scale more. And then it moved to decentralization, the PC. Everybody is going to have their own computer, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. And then it moved to centralization again with the cloud, and the cloud controlled. But in each of these motions, a new set of technologies emerge, and I think the goal is to have independence, freedoms, the freedom of the people, as it were. And so decentralization from the internet era on has been a dream that has never really been realized. And it's because governments intermediate it. It's because wealthy and big companies intermediate it. When we were at Netscape, one of the reasons we didn't really succeed long term was we had a company like Microsoft with a gun pointed at our heads because they had a lot to lose with their franchise if decentralization took off too fast and did too well. And, they ended up paying a couple $1 billion for anti-competitive behavior, but oh, shucks, they got to live. And so you're going to see technologies emerge and then wane, but maybe not go away. And so with Web3, it's truly the promise of decentralization realized. And it's because for the first time, you're able to account for what an individual does and keep that individual's information. That's the first innovation that allowed and enabled it. And so, crypto to me isn't as important as blockchain because blockchain and the underlying technologies really just enable a central source of truth, a ledger that captures every transaction in the world, a single source of truth. And humans are messy. And even between a bank and the rails of a transaction engine and two people doing a transaction creates 4 points of possible failure. And so having one source of truth, I think, is a really exciting idea. Number one. Number two, then being able to scale that to 8 billion people as the ultimate possibility is really, really interesting. And then being able to scale that to trillions of connected entities becomes another really interesting opportunity. And so I think there's decades of innovation to happen with Web3. How it happens, why it happens, who initiates it, that's all a big question mark. And as you brought up, there are good actors and there are bad actors always.
Well, and going back to the Microsoft example, wouldn't Microsoft just say, hey, well, that's all well and good. Just do it on our platform, right? Like, we already have your data as it is. Do it on our platform, right? And going back to this, like, contracting, I don't know. I think lots of people, you see a lot of like nostalgic things about the internet, what the internet used to be. It used to be this, people would go on communities and web rings and portals, and I think lots of people are just straight up depressed with the fact that all these communities that we built are just owned by 2 or 3 companies, right? And I going back to that contracting of centralizing and decentralizing, do we see a world where people are going off of these platforms and into smaller apps and into smaller communities and into more niche things where they have more control, like this idea of the Fediverse or like, communities that are more owned by people, not so much personal one by one like a PC, but more of those broken out communities. Do you see that being a next phase that we're going back into, or
100%? It's again because of the advent of new technologies, and so both the cost of computing has come down so dramatically. It makes technology in its own right way more accessible to everybody. So I think, and that will continue. Moore's law, things get faster and cheaper. I think that's a spectacular thing, but then the emergence of things like blockchains, things like AI, help people start to garner more control over what they want to focus on, what they want to do, what they want to build, what they want to accomplish. Because now the creator, the idea person, doesn't need to necessarily be a developer or a coder, doesn't necessarily need to have a deep understanding of Python or Java. But back to the kind of this Borg of 2 billion people in a social community that we know that's not working that well. So micro segments and micro and nano communities are starting to emerge. And I think when centralization gets too big and too amorphous and too in control, you see bad things happen. When decentralization gets too big, too amorphous, too in control, bad things happen. And so there's this balance. There's this yin and yang that we're always going to see.
Where are we right now?
Well, I think I actually think we're in a really challenging time, because I think people in general, both as individuals and as communities, are starting to lack trust in the institutions, both big institutions, capital I, like governments and education and banks, but also institutions that are emerging as the digital institutions, the Googles and the Facebooks, the Metas of the world, Amazon. You're seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly of when something just becomes too much. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're deep in centralization land right now, but I think we're moving quickly away from centralization land.
Yeah, and I think that that barrier of that code barrier that you were mentioning, I've seen lots of people build startups. Oh, this is the next new thing. It gets bought up, it gets disassembled and pulled into that centralized world. That's kind of where it's been the past decade almost, right? Yeah. But now, and that barrier has always been capital to invest into code, into technology, and we're seeing that kind of become less of a barrier for that net new thing. So do you think that these advancements in AI and blockchain are going to be blow the door out and allow for a lot more innovation on that side? Like if I don't need to hire a team of 10 to 15 developers to build out an app and build a community, what's stopping me, right?
Well, we're real. Like I said, I think we're in a really disruptive time, for me, I've had this 37-year window to look at, and it's overwhelming to me because there's so much we don't know. We're walking into a time where I think it's different than other cycles in the tech kind of evolution. And I think this one's gonna bite a bit. It's gonna hurt because there's this really great book that came out over 15 years ago called The Second Machine Age. And what it talks about and compares and contrasts is the first machine age, the steam engine, and how it just changed society over hundreds of years. And the second machine age is the computer. And so the first machine age was the replacement of muscle. The second machine age is the replacement of brain. And so we're now starting to see signs of us not having to think because a computer will think on our behalves, and what that really means. And so it's exciting because the possibilities are endless about what and how we can point those great innovations. But it's also really, really scary. And in the first machine age, when people were in the fields and making their livelihood, and then the steam engine came along and tractors, and they were replacing the jobs of horses and replacing field hand work, etc. The world was going to be horrible. And in the first machine age, there was a very dark 2 or 3 decades because there was this transitional time where people had to understand how to behave, how to think, how to operate differently as a society. And so that society became more educated. So they introduced reading, writing, and arithmetic. And there were offices, and there were just different things to be considered because of the introduction of this powerful capability. Well, fast forward to where we're at now, and we have the same considerations to make. You know, what is society going to look like with these emergent technologies?
Yeah, and I saw a really good quote on Reddit. You go through the Reddit comments. It's the best part about Reddit. And someone said something about AI. They were like, I was hoping that AI would automate all the menial tasks that we had in society. Instead, it's ruining art and education. But it's like...
But is it?
But is it? I don't know. But it's like you said. You're gonna have the people that are gonna... Obviously, the candlestick makers are gonna be mad when you learn how to make candles in a machine factory. That's fine. I would love to live in a world where I don't have to work, and I don't have to do I don't have to do long division, right? We've been through this a million times, right? But I guess what that quote from me, what it says is like, where's that real benefit? When are we going to see if I still need to call my bank and I have to have one person email another person, and it's going to take me, 5 months to get a bank product still. I'm not seeing that yet. When is that going to roll out, and what do we need to do to get that suck out of our lives and and get these new digital products or these new technologies into the places where they're really going to make convenience and impact in our life?
Well, but to just unpack what you were just saying, like, what's a bank? Mm-hmm. And what will a bank be, and what will it look like, and what will it do? What's a telephone company? What's a media company? Everything is up for grabs, especially when innovation gets to the level it's getting to now. Because back in the first machine age, there was one core big, innovation. And I would say the innovation before that was probably the printing press. And now we have truly dozens of exponential technologies that are presenting themselves. Sensory technologies, so that you can put literally a computer on anything that moves and be able to measure it in different ways. The blockchain, the healthcare, and the genetic engineering that we're getting into. There are so many layers and layers of innovation that have been enabled by technology that are all in their own right taking on this curve. And so I really think what's going to matter as we move through this next stage is really focus on how we operate and how we organize as people. And I do think where there needs to be thinking and innovation is around how we operate and think, both for and on behalf of ourselves, and how we think on behalf of groups of people, whether they be towns, cities, communities, society at large. And that is going to be really important. And both Mark Carney, a great Canadian who wrote a book called Values, and Ray Dalio, both genius economic people, financial architects in their own right. And what do they call out as the most important thing? It's the creation of values in society. It's the creation of value in and through society. And valuation will come. It will always come. And I think what's happened in the world right now is it's flipped on its head, and everybody's focused on valuation. If you look at the attention economy right now, which is your social networks like TikTok and Instagram, what's everybody talking about? How to make money, not how to create value, not how to become a better person. And so in Ray Dalio's book, Principles in a Changing World Order, he talks about these cycles, these economic cycles, and the first 2 or 3 are about developing value for society. And the last 3 are the breakdown of value in society. People print more money, people borrow more money, people get more divided, money flows higher to the top, and then they kill the king. And then there's a new superpower that comes in. And that trend has been going for 500 years. And so we, I think, are hitting a once every 500 years or even more, this time where how we think about forming a society, how we support society needs to come back to some pretty basic things. And it's are we taking care of everybody in the right ways, including our planet? Are we creating and are we truly a productive society? Are we building value? And the valuation side will come. And so I think there needs to be a whole new mindset on how we lead and how people organize moving forward, using technologies obviously and other things.
Yeah, that's so true. It kind of comes back to what you were saying about, yes, the technology is the thing, but what's the value behind it? And that value does lead to valuation later, right? And you see, so I was just watching a thing this morning on, Blizzard, the
Yep.
Blizzard Activision,
Yep.
and it was just an absolute nightmare on how, it went through just trying to make money out of it in any certain way and just absolutely pissing off the fans along the way. It's such a, and I think when it comes to innovation and I think there's a huge pressure on people building things to now just make money out of it rather than, and so much of good innovation gets wasted without like core values of what you're building and why you're building it, right? So,
and again, back to this book I was talking about, The Second Machine Age, there's this concept in the book called bounty and spread. And the bounty in a rich society goes to everybody. People are prosperous, they are making money. But when you hit those last cycles of a bad economic situation, that bounty goes to fewer and fewer people at the top. And there's this concept of spread where more and more people have less and less. And there just becomes this tipping point where society goes, I've had enough of this, and they storm the castle. I think what's really interesting in this cycle is that for the first time we're seeing that countries no longer have power. Countries actually are poor, they're in debt, they're all printing money, whether it's China or Russia or the America. And so for the first time, that bounty and spread has broken off into individuals. And there are 2,500 families in this world who are building properties in multiple places in an island so that they can protect their money. But the money isn't flowing to society. And that is going to be one of many things that are going to need to be considered as we get to this next chapter. It's not just about innovation. It's just not about tech. It's just not about making money. It's about creating this ongoing balance between people and ideas and capital and Peter Diamandis in the book Abundance. There's plenty to go around for everybody. But people get all frothy and focused on making their dollars, and all of a sudden there's people worth $200 billion. Why? And why aren't they being put under pressure to give money to other things other than either themselves or whatever, but they're building rocket ships. And so there's a lot.
I have no
to break
clue
down.
who you're talking about.
What do you mean?
But yeah, I mean, that's the VC world, and that's like the investment world, and that's where especially and tech's like at the edge of that sword, right? That's where lots of that just it gets put into that innovation. That's about all we got for today. But I feel like there's a second discussion after that. But yeah, that's great. Thanks for coming along, and
Thanks for having me.
I feel a little bit wiser.
Yeah,
And
right.
I feel like the wave is a little bit bigger than maybe I'm underestimating the wave.
It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time.
Yeah.